Hello and welcome back to the NFL DFS Slate Breakdown for Monday Night Football. We got the Texans at the Cowboys on November 18th. We're going to be breaking it down. We got an interesting slate to go over. We got a big spread. Texans heavily favored, and we will dive into it. But before we do that, I am your host, Tyler Weeman, at FlatTyler83 on Twitter and your DFS sites. And come join us at LineStar. $39.99 per month gets you access to all we do, all the props, all the DFS. You get it all for all the sports we cover, all the tools, one low price. Now, let's get into the slate. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the video. It helps us a ton. And let's get it done now. All right, 41.5 game total. Dallas 7-point underdogs at home. Then we got CJ Stroud, 9,800 and 8K for Cooper Rush. Wild that they're only 1,800 difference. No surprise that CJ Stroud is getting all the ownership. We got Cooper Rush projected for 11, 1.5x. I mean, the issue here is that he really hasn't done much as a starter. Last week, he did absolutely nothing. 23 attempts, 13 completions, 45 yards. It was just ugly versus that Eagles team that has been very solid D and very solid versus the wide receivers. So I'm not super surprised that he struggled versus that team. When he came in versus Atlanta, he was at least serviceable. 115 yards, 13 completions, had a touchdown. I would expect he's able to do a little bit more than that. His passing prop is only at 150 yards. The likelihood of him having 200 plus yards in this spot is slim. I don't think you really need to have him, but can at least consider him. CJ Stroud is in a very good spot. I don't mind going with him. The one issue here is, are we going to see him have enough pass attempts to really win? The one thing with him that I think is interesting, in his wins, he's having, 30 plus attempts. In his losses are the ones where he's not throwing the ball very much. So I think Texans definitely need to get CJ Stroud going a little bit. They got Nico Collins back. They're going to want to give him some reps and some action. So I think Stroud's interesting and probably going to be used a ton in that first half before the Texans are really able to build a big lead. If we look at our matchup tool for the quarterback spot, 30th versus quarterback is for CJ Stroud, or is Dallas, and 27th versus quarterback is Houston over the last 5. So they have given it up to quarterbacks a little bit. That's similar spot to Atlanta. So there is that chance of, say, 15-ish plus fantasy points for Cooper Rush. So he needs to be considered. Now let's get over to the running back spot. So we got Joe Mixon, clear bell cow for Texans, just has an absolute huge workload. And when he's on the field, has done very, very well. Has 3 games of around 30 fantasy points, then a 26 and a 20 mixed in there. And I think you got to consider him at 11K in this spot. He definitely also could go as a captain. The one caveat to that is, if we look at the running back spot for, the Dallas defense, over the last 5 games, they have been 8th versus the running back. But if over the last 20, they jump up to 20th. Or sorry, over the last 10 games, they jump up to 20th. So this has been a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde spot for the Dallas Cowboys and stopping the run. They have been very good versus the run lately and have faced some really good running backs. So not a spot that I really love Mixon as far as ease, but he's going to get a ton of touches, and that alone puts him into consideration. Rico Dowdle, 9K. I think this is a very interesting one. He's going low owned, 28% owned. He's most likely to get all the work here, or a majority of the work. He had 15 touches last week in a blowout. The week before that, he had 17 touches. I think we can count on 12 to, 20 touches or somewhere in there. And he's good enough to do well. The issue is the Houston Texans have been very good against the running back all season long. Now, the Cowboys' best chance to be able to win this game is slow it down, run the ball effectively, and keep the game close into the fourth quarter and just hope you're able to come up with a play to win the game at the end. So that is the Cowboys' path to victory. With that, I think Dowdle is a little interesting, but he has some hurdles to come over because that Texans D, the strength of it is stopping this run. They are, however, at least missing Will Anderson, who is one of their best defensive line players. So Dowdle is a little bit interesting. After that, for the running back mix, it's a mess. Dameon Pierce should be active. He's been removed from the injury report. Only game he played a decent amount was this one where he had 8 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown, but that was still only 27% of the snaps. So he will likely come in. He is going to come in as the RB2, but I wouldn't expect him to do too much. You can use him. There's the path to him being successful is a huge blowout. He gets lucky and breaks a long one. Or Joe Mixon gets hurt. That's the scenarios really where you're using Pierce. Dare has been used, a very little amount through the season. I wouldn't really expect him to be involved in this game whatsoever. Zeke Elliott, you could possibly go to, but only 6 carries last week. He is absolutely the RB2, and I just don't see much upside to him in this spot with how this offense has been running. Now, getting over to the wide receiver spot. Now, this is a spot that I think is interesting to discuss. Nico Collins is back. He is getting the most ownership. 64% going to him. He is 10.4K. The thing is that he is going against Trayvon Diggs, who is the better corner for the Cowboys, but Diggs is susceptible to a big play. The Cowboys are third with 40-plus big plays allowed, 40-plus yard big plays allowed in the passing game. So they are very susceptible to that, and Nico happens to be one of the best deep threats in the league. So I think it's interesting playing Nico Collins here, even though he is in a tougher spot than Tank Dell. But Tank Dell does have the easier path. Versus wide receiver 2, the Cowboys have struggled all year long. 25th over the last 5, 23rd over the last 10. I think Tank Dell has that path of least resistance. However, I think Nico Collins has that splash play, and I wouldn't mind using some Nico for captain spot because I think there is a chance of over 100 and touchdown type game for him. Nico, I don't think really has the 100 and a touchdown capable in this matchup, but I mean, he could. I just don't think it's likely. Then we get over to the Cowboy spot. CeeDee Lamb is obvious best spot. He had 10 targets last week, but I think he's going to struggle to get over 80 or 100 yards, and he's similar price to Nico Collins. So I don't really want to go to CD. Now, if we look at the other wide receivers, there's definitely different spots we can go. Tolbert is interesting. He's a rookie. He's, had a couple games, had 6 targets versus Atlanta, 5 targets versus Philly. He is 4,600. But a spot that I think is really interesting is Jalen Brooks, who is 2K, had 5 targets versus Atlanta, had 4 targets versus Philly, so similar target numbers as Tolbert. He's going to be on the field likely 60-ish%, and he has probably worked with Rush more than anybody else, any other wide receiver for this whole season on the Cowboys team, as, he's been a second stringer for most of the year. So I think Jalen Brooks is pretty interesting. The other thing is that we have a total wild card in Jonathan Mingo, who got traded to the Cowboys and he's set to make his debut this week. Now, no idea how much of the playbook he would know, so it is 100% a wild card of how much he could be involved, but at least one we could bring up. And then Turpin is just a big play threat. If he can bust one, he'll be optimal. If he can't bust one, he's not going to be optimal. But he did lose some playing time to Brooks over the last couple weeks. So I do prefer Brooks, even though our projections are favoring Turpin a little bit. When projections are, this low, I don't take them, as weighted, just because there's so many different things that can happen here. And then Mechie probably falls back a little bit in this spot. He was the wide receiver 2 last time. I would expect him to be more like the wide receiver 4 in this situation. Hutchinson is pretty locked in as the wide receiver 3. So if you want another Texans wide receiver, I would say it's more likely he gets something done than Mechie. Now, getting over to the tight end spot. Dalton Schultz, absolutely interesting. Jake Ferguson, absolutely interesting. Ferguson is the more likely one to produce of the two, and he's another guy I would absolutely consider on the Cowboys side, as you're going to have to play somebody. He's going to get targets, 10 targets versus Atlanta, 5 versus Philly. I would expect him in that, 5 to 8 range tonight, and that is enough to at least make him optimal or have a chance to be optimal. After all, whoever gets the 1 or 2 touchdowns that happen for the Cowboys, it's going to be them that becomes optimal. So those are the guys that we really need to try and key in on. It's pretty obvious that the most likely scenario for the optimal lineup tonight is something like a 5-1 or a 4-2 Texans to Dallas kind of combo. So Ferguson is interesting. Dalton Schultz, he's going to get some run. It's just he's been low target volume all season long. Now Nico Collins is back. I think it's just going to be a little bit harder for him to get there. I don't mind having some Dalton Schultz. His tight ends are just great around the red zone area, so definitely a little bit interested in him. If we go to the matchup tool, Dalton Schultz does have the clear path, or the better path as far as the strength of the defense, but Jake Ferguson I'd probably be a little more interested in playing because he's just more involved with his own team, and you got to go somewhere on the Cowboys, and that is one interesting one. Get over to the defenses and kicker now. So Texans 6,200. They're missing some key spots. They're going to be missing a cornerback. They're missing Will Anderson. So I think they may struggle to get after the quarterback a little bit in this spot. They haven't, been a huge defense as it is, but it is at least Cooper Rush. So there is a little bit more chance of a fumble or interception, something like that. But after all, for them to really be optimal, they either need to keep the Cowboys under 6 points and rack up, fumble, interception, get some sacks, whatnot, or they need to get a touchdown of some sort. So there is a path for them tonight. I don't mind having some of them. My expectation is they probably go a little higher owned than they really should, because their path to being optimal is a touchdown. It's a, kind of a fluky play as a whole. So I would expect them to go over owned, but I don't mind having some. Cowboys are in a very tough defensive spot. They haven't really been good all season long, but at least Parsons is back, so maybe he can make something going. On to the kicker side. There is a very large chance that the Cowboys stall once they get into the red zone, which means more opportunities to kick field goals. But the issue here is, how many times are they even going to get into that the opponent's area of the field? It may not be very many. I definitely would rather Fairburn over Aubrey, but having some Aubrey is interesting. and it's one way you can get another Cowboy player into your lineup. Fairbarn, he's interesting. He's been very good this season. He averaging 2.99 field goal attempts, 2.4 made per game. They're going to score. They're going to have their opportunities. And if the Dallas Cowboys defense has improved a little bit with Parsons back, they may stall a little bit in that Cowboys red zone territory or field goal area. And if that's the case, then Kaimi has a shot to be optimal for sure. I mean, these first 3 of these first 5 games, he was there where he could be optimal. You're really going to need a 15-plus point performance from him, but it's possible, just not probable. So I'm interested, but probably not going to have a ton of him. That will do it for us today, though. We got Texans versus Cowboys, an interesting game. You're going to have to tell a story with your lineup a little bit and figure out which Cowboys to really want to use tonight. Wish you guys the best of luck. Let's make some money, and I will be back later this week with more content. Peace!